Hey guys, Corbin here, and this is part 3 of my Avid CNC build series. I'm really only going to discuss what I did differently from the standard CNC build and why I did those things. Now if you follow Avid's directions, then your machine is probably out of alignment, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a bit. In the last video I talked about welding my base table and building the CNC on top of it. In this video I'm going to discuss how I tried to make it into more of a precise machine. So I spent quite a bit of time leveling the machine and in particular the base aluminum extrusions for the table. I then went ahead and followed Avid's directions and built the gantry on top of the base table. Now the precision of the machine is entirely based on the linear rails. I used my machinist level to check my linear rails, and I discovered they were not level despite the table being perfectly level. Avid's directions use 2 rail alignment jigs to position the rails. The directions have you loosely install the 2 rails and clamp a jig on one end and another jig in the middle at the splice point. You then tighten down the first rail half and move the jig to the other end and tighten down the second rail half. Okay, so here's the jig and let me measure them. So this first one here, if I measure it, it's about 946.5, 947. So this one here is at about 942. So what that means is this jig is about 5/1000ths of an inch thicker than this other jig. So if the shorter jig is in the middle, that means we get a slight bend in the rails at the seam where it's about 5/1000ths of an inch higher. The worst case scenario is using the jigs in a different order for the other side, creating it at 5/1000ths of an inch lower in the middle on the other side. Hopefully this makes it clear that the rails will not be in the same plane, making it impossible for the machine to do level cuts over the entire length of the table. Now my gantry was already sitting on the machine when I realized this problem happened, and I didn't want to remove it because it's pretty heavy. I solved the problem with a dial test indicator and a precision machinist level. I'll put a link in the description for where you can get these. So I jogged the gantry from the front all the way to the back of the machine, and I loosened all the linear rails up to the seam. I placed the jig at the start to give it a rough starting position and semi-tightened that first bolt. I put my machinist level on the linear rail and leveled the rail, tightening the linear rail bolts as I went down towards the seam. Once I got to the seam, I loosened about 4 or 5 bolts onto the next section past the seam. Okay, so here I have the dial test indicator, and I'm going to put it on the part that I already flattened and leveled. I can zero it out, and now if I rotate it from one side to the other past the seam, I can find out if it's lower or higher, and then I can adjust this up and down until it's right at 0. So once I had the seam level, I jogged the machine back to the front of the table. I could then repeat the entire process down the rest of the linear rail. Once I had one rail completely straight and level, I could repeat the entire process on the other side. So one of the things about doing this is that one linear rail might be slightly lower or higher than the other side. That's okay, and it'll be dealt with in just a little bit. When I put my level on the gantry, I could see it was dead level. But testing the x-axis linear rails indicated that they were not level due to the jigs. I jogged the x-axis to the side of the gantry and loosened most of the bolts on the top rail and did a similar process as before to level it. I did find it useful to use the dial test indicator to see exactly how much I was moving the rail up or down to get things level. This helped me precisely control the movement I was doing. I measured the distance between the 2 rails with some calipers and just replicated this distance across the entire bottom rail to ensure they were dead parallel to each other. I then jogged the gantry to the other side of the machine. I had marked where I left off, and I loosened the remaining bolts and did the same process to align them. Now, the process of using a level to align the x-axis rails will compensate for the two y-axis rails potentially being not in a level plane. So the entire process was quite time-consuming. I knew that taking more time to ensure it was level would give me better precision in the end, and I think it was time well spent. If you have any questions, feel free to post them down in the comments. In the next video, I'm going to talk about making my precision spoil board table. Thanks, everyone.